gearbox pressure.
Oh, hell. Race!
Off the coast of Newfoundland, a helicopter crashes into the ocean.
When you see a tragedy like this, it makes many, many people across the country understand the sorrow.
17 people are dead. Remarkably, one man survives.
Look at it. Somehow, he gets out in a helicopter that is sinking past 30 feet.
It was a long descent. Eventually, my arms broke the surface.
It's very important to analyze what affected their ability to exit the aircraft.
What investigators uncover has a critical impact on the safety of every helicopter flying over water.
That man is lucky to be alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are starting our approach.
We lost both engines.
Keep the mask over your nose. Emergency descent.
Race for impact!
He's gonna crash.
Cougar Flight 91 prepares for liftoff. This is a commuter run from St. John's, Newfoundland to offshore platforms in the Hibernia oil fields. Captain Matthew Davis is at the controls. In a helicopter, unlike an airplane, the captain sits on the starboard or right-hand side.
Next stop, Sea Roads.
First Officer Tim Lanouette is in the left-hand seat. A veteran Navy helicopter pilot, he's a newcomer to civilian aviation.
Ground, Cougar 91, request takeoff.
Cougar 91, depart to the south, then on course. Clear for takeoff.
The helicopter they're flying is a Sikorsky S-92. It's a large aircraft with room for 17 passengers and their gear.
The Sikorsky S-92 was kind of designed for this mission. You can look at the S-92 as kind of a merging of their best ideas from the U.S. Army's Black Hawk helicopter.
The Hibernia oil fields are 170 miles from St. John's. It would take 15 hours to get there by boat.
Autopilot engaged.
Autopilot engaged, copy.
By helicopter, it's only a 90-minute flight. So for workers on oil rigs, it's the primary mode of transportation.
We only have 2 for the Sea Rows.
Affirmative, and 14 for Hibernia.
Let's lighten the load early. Alpha routing.
Copy. Gander, Cougar 91, taking a look at the ops plan here. We would like to amend our flight plan. We would like to go Alpha routing, Hibernia first, then Sea Rows.
A minor change in plan. Cougar 91 will travel to the Hibernia rig and then proceed to the Sea Rows platform.
Okay. Cougar 91 is cleared to Hibernia via
The amended route.
The flight is almost full. The 16 passengers are service workers, the cooks and cleaners of the offshore world. Robert Decker is a weather observer for rigs in the North Atlantic. He's made this flight 50 times over the past 3 years.
Because there are so many constraints on the amount of space and the amount of weight that a helicopter can carry, the amenities in the helicopter are just stripped down to the bone. So you're not going to find any of the amenities that you would find in an Airbus or a Boeing.
Boiling in here.
High visibility survival suits are mandatory on all helicopter flights over the open sea.
Unlike an airplane, if you have to ditch in the water for any reason, the aircraft will not float. An airplane will float for, anywhere from 5 minutes to many hours. The helicopter will simply sink like a rock.
28 minutes into the flight, Cougar 91 is leveled off at the standard cruising altitude.
9,000 feet.
9,000 feet, copy.
3 weeks on, 3 weeks off.
Life on a rig.
I don't know what's worse. 3 weeks off, I'd get bored.
Gearbox pressure. Gearbox pressure.
MGB oil pressure.
Oil is the lifeblood of a helicopter. A problem with the oil pressure can be catastrophic.
Emergency checklist?
While First Officer Lanouette looks for the checklist,
Autopilot off.
Captain Davis disengages the autopilot so he has complete control of the aircraft. Then, he does what all captains hope they will never have to do.
Gander Center, Cougar 91, Mayday.
Cougar 91, go ahead.
Sir, we have a main gearbox oil pressure problem. Request immediate clearance.
Back to takeoff.
Cougar 91, roger. You can make a right turn heading 300.
The controller contacts the search and rescue headquarters in Halifax.
Halifax, Gander Center. We have a mayday call from a Sikorsky S92, currently on return to St. John's. Main gearbox problem.
Flight 91 is 54 miles from land. It will take them 30 minutes to reach shore. Captain Davis alerts Cougar Helicopters Dispatch Center in St. John's.
Dispatch,
Cougar 91, we're coming back to St. John's.
Cougar 91, dispatch. Roger, keep us advised.
I'm taking her down to the water.
Roger.
Checklist?
Yeah, I'm still trying to find it. It might be at the back of the book.
Main gearbox failure. We should be getting smells, vibrations. I don't smell anything. What about the back?
Nothing. Nobody's doing anything in the cab.
Cougar 91 is descending to just under 1,000 feet. The helicopter is now 52 miles from St. John's.
Gander Center, for Cougar 91, which runway would you like me to set you up for?
I'm going for the nearest piece of terra firma I can get to, whatever I see first, if it's Cape Spear or a parking lot.
Okay, I got the checklist. MGB pressure below 35 psi.
The pressure gauge indicates that the main gearbox oil pressure is well below the normal range of 45 to 70 psi.
Confirmed. MGB oil temperature greater than 130 degrees.
But the reading on the temperature gauge is not what it would be if there were a loss of oil pressure.
Your temperature looks normal. Problem could be with the sensor.
Cougar 91, Gander.
Search and rescue has been notified.
And if you have the time, I'll take the souls on board and fuel remaining.
Okay, 2992, we have about 3 hours of fuel on board and 18 persons on board. This is the captain.
We've had a major technical problem, and at this time, I'd ask for everyone to prepare your survival suits. We are heading for the closest land.
Cougar 91, dispatch.
Go for 91.
Rescue is asking if ditching is imminent, probable, or possible.
Dispatch 91, ditching is possible.
If possible, can you update our senior pilot on the situation?
Dispatch, I think we have an oil pump problem or an oil pressure sensor problem.
Matt, can you describe the symptoms?
The gearbox oil temperature is still normal. I don't think we've lost all the oil in the system. I'm on a heading for closest landfall if this goes south on us.
Cougar 91 is still 35 miles from the nearest land. But now...
Oh, hell. Dispatch, we're ditching.
Ditching! Airspeed 122, Matt.
I think it just kicked on me.
Okay, nose up, nose up. All right, we're turning.
Call it in.
We're getting prepared to ditch. Ditching!
Ditching, 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 ditching!
$500 feet. You got this. Get it pointed downwind. Grace! Brace!
Brace! Brace!
The passengers and crew of Cougar 91 are now trapped inside a sinking helicopter. One of the most advanced helicopters in the world has dropped out of the sky into the icy North Atlantic off the coast of Newfoundland.
When you see a tragedy like this, it makes many, many people across the country understand the risks and understand the sorrow.
17 people are dead. There is only one survivor. Robert Decker, a young offshore oil worker, is rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. The close-knit offshore oil community is shattered and looking for answers.
It's hard, you know, to believe that it happened to somebody within your community.
This was an international accident. There were about 80 Sikorsky S-92s operating worldwide, and they were operating in every extreme environment you can imagine. We really needed to drill down and figure out what had happened and why it had happened.
The answers lie 554 feet beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. Within hours of the crash, Canada's Transportation Safety Board assembles a team to recover the wrecked helicopter and discover the cause of the crash. Mike Cunningham will lead the investigation.
We were looking at a major accident, and it was going to require a significant response from the TSB.
The Transportation Safety Board is provided with the Atlantic Osprey, a vessel designed to service offshore oil rigs. Alan Chalk will lead the recovery effort.
It's one of the best pieces of equipment in this area. When it comes to recovery, it's very well equipped.
Using the last known waypoints for Cougar 91, the ship locates the wreckage within hours.
So our number one priority was to recover the victims, and then the priority became the multipurpose flight recorder and the remainder of the wreckage.
Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, are deployed to recover the victims and retrieve the wreckage from the ocean floor.
Yeah, this'll do.
The TSB sets up operations in a hangar at St. John's International Airport.
Yeah, tell them all the wreckage comes in here.
There was no indication of any problems until the Mayday came in.
Right, that's what we heard as well.
While Cunningham waits for the wreckage to be recovered, he interviews the air traffic controller who last had contact with the doomed helicopter.
We talked to the air traffic controllers to find out how things went on their end. We look at their comm tapes, their radar tapes.
Mayday came in at 09:45.
Gander Center, Cougar 91, Mayday.
Cougar 91, go ahead.
Sir, we have a main gearbox oil pressure problem.
Cunningham gets his first clue.
He said that they had lost all main gearbox oil pressure. So this was important information for us.
The main gearbox uses power from the engines to spin the main and tail rotors. Like the transmission in a car, the gearbox requires a constant supply of oil to keep moving parts lubricated.
The main gearbox in a helicopter is a very critical piece of equipment. The failure of the gearbox would mean a loss of lifting power from the main rotor, the loss of directional control to the tail rotor.
Cunningham needs to find out what caused the oil pressure warning the crew reported. Could there have been an oil leak in the main gearbox?
Request immediate clearance back to takeoff.
So the captain requested clearance back to St. John's, and that's 54 nautical miles. How long would that take to fly?
30 minutes.
But Cougar 91 went down in
11 minutes.
The fact that Cougar 91 went down so quickly supports Cunningham's hunch that there was an oil leak in the main gearbox. But it doesn't explain why the pilots thought they could still reach land.
So something convinced him that he can make it back.
Looking for answers, Cunningham asks the senior pilot at Cougar Helicopters if anything stood out from his radio exchange with the crew.
Anything at all you could tell me would be helpful.
There's one thing that bugs me, the oil temperature.
If the oil pressure inside the gearbox is falling and the oil is leaking out, the temperature would begin to rise because now the gears are grinding against each other and generating a lot of heat.
He said the oil temperature was normal.
The gearbox oil temperature is still normal. I don't think we've lost all the oil in the system.
He thought he still had oil.
The crew thought they could make it back to land because the oil temperature read normal. So was the oil pressure warning a false alarm?
When the crew mentioned the oil temperature and it was indicating normally, this told us that we needed to make sure that what they were seeing was in fact accurate to what was going on with the helicopter.
Only the wreckage can provide the answers. 5 days of calm seas make the helicopter's quick recovery from the ocean floor possible.
Over by the cabin floor.
The team finally gets a first look at the wreckage. What can it reveal about the deadly crash?
When you look at an aircraft that strikes land, you have a wreckage trail. You have ground scars that can tell you certain things. The water gives up very little. There's nothing left to look at. It's just the surface of the water. So you have to focus on the fuselage.
Damn. So it was upright when it hit.
Pancake. Dropped like a rock.
My initial impression of the helicopter was that it struck the water at a significant vertical rate. When an object hits water, water's non-compressible. It'll cause a little bit of a different kind of damage signature than what would be as if it hit the land.
It's hard to believe anyone survived.
Investigator Alan Chalk's recovery of Cougar 91 provides a big break in the investigation.
Here you go.
What do we got here?
Voice recorder transcript and audio file.
All the flight data on here?
Yep.
Okay, good.
A major piece in any investigation is recorders. You start narrowing the focus down in each component.
Will the data confirm an oil pressure problem in the main gearbox?
Look at this. Here's the oil pressure warning. Here's the oil supply. Gone.
The flight data recorder shows the main gearbox oil pressure dropped from 54 psi to 0 in less than 2 minutes.
That happened fast.
If the gearbox had lost all oil pressure, the possibility of a catastrophic failure of the gearbox had to be taken into consideration.
Uh-huh.
Within days of the wreckage recovery, the helicopter's manufacturer, Sikorsky, has questions about the crash.
That's right, the whole main gearbox. Sikorsky. All right. Yeah, good. Yeah, we'll be expecting you. Great.
They're coming?
Yeah, and the FAA, they want to take a look at the whole main gearbox.
It turns out Sikorsky and the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, are extremely interested in the same piece of wreckage as Cunningham.
Go around this way, come over here.
When the FAA and Sikorsky showed up, it seemed they were very anxious about this accident.
We need to look at this.
They unrolled a schematic of the main gearbox and said that this is something that we have to look closely at.
This isn't the first time this has happened, is it?
Investigators learned that 8 months earlier, a Sikorsky S-92 in Australia got the same gearbox warning.
Gearbox pressure. Gearbox pressure.
But that S-92 reached land in less than 7 minutes without incident. The circumstances are identical.
Catastrophic loss of oil, unusual oil temperature reading, same.
We were conscious about not jumping to conclusions too early. That being said, if it was indeed the same problem that was encountered in Australia, it was going to be important to take action quickly.
Is there some flaw in the design of the main gearbox?
So what went wrong?
Right here, the oil filter bowl.
The oil filter bowl filters the 11 gallons of oil circulating through the main gearbox. It's fastened to the gearbox with 3 studs. The investigators now focus on this key component.
Here we go.
Wow, 2 of the studs are gone.
It was very obvious once we pulled back the panels that surround the main gearbox that 2 attachment points had definitely been compromised. There was a gap between oil filter housing and the main gearbox, and that's where the oil in the main gearbox exited.
So it wasn't a slow leak. Poured out all at once.
This discovery confirms what investigators saw in the FDR data, an extremely sudden loss of oil. They now have concrete evidence that oil leaked because of the broken studs.
So, what made the studs fail?
What is it made out of?
These ones? Titanium.
This looks like galling.
Galling is a form of wear caused when 2 surfaces are moving against each other, particularly 2 different metals under pressure. Titanium is prone to galling, especially when in contact with steel.
When you're trying to tighten a nut onto a stud that has a significant amount of galling, it can actually jam before it's properly tightened in the location it should be in.
Once fatigue cracking began, well, it's just a matter of time till failure.
Sikorsky studied the Australian helicopter's broken studs and concluded the galling was caused by the steel nuts used to fasten them.
Aaron, take a look at this.
Alert to operators of the S-92, replace all titanium studs within a year or 1,200 flying hours.
6 weeks before the Newfoundland crash, Sikorsky issued an advisory to swap the titanium studs for steel studs.
They knew the studs could fail.
Sikorsky had known there was a problem with these studs previously. The thing that we found distressing was that most of these studs showed some kind of damage on them, which this enhanced visual inspection should have picked up.
Sikorsky said that the titanium studs would last at least a year. Cougar got the replacement parts, but maintenance didn't think that it was urgent enough to replace the studs immediately.
When the accident occurred, those parts had just been recently received by the company, and they knew they had to replace these studs eventually with new steel ones.
The question now is, why did Cougar delay replacing the studs?
Oh, hell. Dispatch, we're ditching.
Investigators need to find out why Sikorsky told operators they could wait a year to replace the studs.
No luck here.
The team examines how the S-92's main gearbox was certified.
All right, I got something. Sikorsky says possible failures of the main gearbox that could result in a rapid loss of oil are extremely remote.
Extremely remote?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
1 in 10 million.
2 failures in less than a year. It's not 1 in 10 million.
Basically, what they're saying is in the normal lifetime of this machine, the possibility of a total loss of lubricant will almost never happen.
Sikorsky didn't communicate the urgency of replacing the studs because they didn't understand how severe the situation really was. As the 17 victims of the crash are laid to rest, the offshore oil community focuses on the Cougar 91 investigation.
We see this accident as something that we're all in together. We're hurting.
Thousands of people, from tourists to world leaders, fly in Sikorsky helicopters every day. Are they at risk from some unknown flaw? Investigators are eager for the medical examiner's report. They hope it will tell them exactly what happened to those on board the helicopter when it hit the water. In the meantime, the team reviews the recordings from the helicopter's cockpit voice recorder, hoping to find out how the pilots handled the emergency situation.
All right, this is at 0945 local.
Dispatch Cougar 91, we're coming back to St. John's.
One of the first things that this crew did was make a 180-degree turn back towards the land, because it's always much better to make an emergency landing on the ground than in the water.
Main gearbox failure. We should be getting smells, vibrations. I don't smell anything.
They're not feeling any vibration. They're not smelling anything burning. It's perfectly understandable that they would want to try to get back to that parking lot at Cape Spear.
Problem could be with the sensor.
As the team continues listening, they hear the pilots troubleshooting the crisis.
Cougar 91, Gander, you are unable to maintain altitude. Is that correct?
In this condition, we have to be
Down as close to the surface as possible in case of a catastrophic failure.
For a crew cruising at 9,000 feet in level flight on a nice day, the first task when a warning light goes on is to try to figure out, is it an indication system problem or is there some kind of real underlying problem?
Captain reduces altitude from 9,000 feet to 1,000 feet.
The CVR then reveals something changed just under 1,000 feet that forced the pilots to suddenly ditch.
Oh, hell. Dispatch, we're ditching.
Ditching! Ditching, ditching, ditching.
Investigators need to find out what that was.
Let's look at the pinion.
The pinion is the gear that transmits power from the main gearbox to the tail rotor.
This tail rotor takeoff pinion is being driven at a high rate. And as heat builds up, the hardness of the material goes away. Now you have potential for damage on the teeth.
Here you go. So, what is this supposed to look like?
Basically, there were no teeth left on that takeoff pinion in the end.
Without oil in the main gearbox, friction wears away the pinion's teeth.
Stripped clean. Well, no pinion, no tail rotor.
No tail rotor, no control.
The tail rotor's main job is to keep the helicopter straight. It counters the spinning force created by the large rotor that lifts the aircraft. Without a tail rotor, the helicopter would spin uncontrollably.
The pilot's only option at that point is to land the helicopter with no engine power.
When the engines are turned off, air flowing upwards through the blades should allow for the helicopter to glide to a safe landing.
The pilot still has control over the helicopter's overall airspeed and direction.
The optimal altitude for such a glide is 200 feet. But the Cougar captain kept his altitude at nearly 1,000 feet.
Why didn't he take it down lower?
There's a 500-foot hill between him and the airport. He was trying to stay high enough to clear it. Way too high.
All right, we're turning.
Call it in.
We're getting prepared to ditch. Ditching!
He was at high airspeed and at 800 feet and at high power. And that aircraft really was not in a position to be ditched in that configuration. That was in no way a ditching that day. That was a crash.
Investigators of the Cougar 91 crash look into the final communications between the captain and first officer.
Okay, so the checklist says land immediately, and we know that's not what they did.
FO says checklist is complete. We're in a land immediately condition.
Land immediately means put the helicopter down even if you're over water or not very flat terrain.
But the captain says...
I'm going to stop descent at 1,000 feet.
First officer is telling him that they should put it down in the water.
Well, it's easier said than done.
We're in a land immediately condition.
Roger, I'm going to stop descent at 1,000 feet.
1,000 feet, okay. Checklist is complete. We're in a land immediately condition.
I would say that there really was a disconnect in that cockpit. The captain had a very strong personality, and as the situation developed, he became more and more intent upon making it to land.
I'm going for the nearest piece of terra firma I can get to, whatever I see first, if it's Cape Spear or a parking lot.
The first officer had more experience in overwater flying and ditching scenarios. He used to fly the Sea Kings for the Canadian military, but he had a quieter personality.
There should have been more interaction between the captain and the first officer. Despite the concerns that the first officer was trying to convey to him about the need to possibly land immediately, when he didn't hear any noises or sounds, he made a decision that he wanted to make, and that's called confirmation bias. He wanted to make it back to shore.
At 09:48:32, the captain says, you know, I'm thinking this is a sensor problem. Why does he think that?
Well, they said that the oil temperature was normal, but with a leak, it should be spiking.
They believed that they had probably an oil pump or oil pressure sensor problem because their oil temperature gauge had not increased at all. It was basically showing what would be expected normally.
No, the oil's reading is normal range.
A sensor in the main gearbox provides an oil temperature reading for the crew.
You know, all the oil's gone by now. It's reading the air temp. It's reading the air temp.
The oil temperature sensor in the main gearbox of the S92 is a wet sensor. If there's no oil present, it's just sensing the ambient temperature within that gearbox.
They felt no strange vibrations.
No.
No smell. And they saw the temperature was normal.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why the guy kept flying.
They had no idea how much trouble they were in. Until the pinion failed.
Oh, hell. Dispatch, we're ditching.
Ditching! Airspeed 122, Matt.
But the tail rotor fails just below 1,000 feet, too high to perform a safe ditching.
They lost directional control of the helicopter, and this is probably the most challenging emergency that any helicopter pilot will face.
With no engine power, descent rate is usually about 1,500 feet per minute. So in the best of circumstances, this crew only had about 30 seconds to do everything right.
Is there anything the pilots could have done in those last few seconds to recover?
So they lost the tail rotor here, and it was all over in less than 15 seconds.
God, the engines! Shut them down, shut them both down!
Shutting down, 1 and 2. Okay, nose up, nose up. All right, we're turning.
Call it in.
We're getting prepared to ditch. Ditching!
Ditching.
500 feet. You got this. Get it pointed downwind.
It's turning right on me. Come on.
There you go. You got this. You got this. You got this.
I'm full up.
Doing good. Keep her spinning. Rotor's low.
It's too late. The fate of Cougar 91 is sealed.
Here we go. Here we go. Race!
The ditching began from 800 feet. So those control inputs were all initiated too high. So the result was essentially a sinking like a rock.
The captain, in the end, he unfortunately wound up in a position where he didn't have enough energy remaining to land safely on the water.
The main gearbox makes helicopters top-heavy. Once they hit water, they tend to capsize and sink quickly.
The aircraft did strike the water with a high vertical descent, and it would not have been on the surface of that water for very long, at all.
Were the passengers doomed once Cougar 91 hit the water? Investigators finally get the medical examiner's report.
Alan, you're not gonna believe this.
The conclusion is shocking.
They all survived the crash.
Instead, all 17 victims died from drowning.
It was a bit of a shock to think that 17 people had survived that impact, but only one had survived the accident.
So why does only Robert Decker survive? How was he able to escape? Investigators start by looking at where he's seated.
So Decker is seated in 3D on the right-hand side.
The team has already determined that as Cougar 91 hit the surface, it rolled left and quickly filled with water.
Decker was lucky to be on the right side.
Undo harness, find a window, get out, get up to the surface. That's if you're not too badly injured. But look at this. I mean, look at it. Somehow, he gets out in a helicopter that is sinking past 30 feet. He holds his breath, he gets to the surface, all in water that is just barely above freezing.
Even with a survival suit on, as soon as you get immersed in that cold water is going to rob your ability to hold your breath.
And he floats there for 1 hour and 20 minutes before he's rescued.
That man is lucky to be alive.
A helicopter with a design flaw.
Gearbox pressure. Gearbox pressure.
Instruments with a misleading readout.
The temperature looks normal.
And a cockpit with differing assessments.
We're in a land immediately condition.
Race! Race!
Only one person survived the resulting crash. What did Robert Decker do to ensure his survival?
It's very important to analyze how individuals would have gotten out and how the individuals that didn't get out, what affected their ability to exit the aircraft.
Investigators hope the lone survivor can provide some answers. 8 months after the crash of Cougar 91, Decker testifies at a hearing in St. John's, Newfoundland.
The helicopter was sinking quickly with its port side down, and it instantly filled with water. It was as if it was sinking the same way it was dropping through the sky. I undid my seatbelt and I pulled myself out through the window. The window would have been directly above me because as it was sinking on its side.
When he first became conscious of where he was and the environment he was in, he looked up and he could see a light in the distance. And because the fuselage was already opened up, he was able to get out.
Then it was a long, I guess, ascent to the surface. I kind of had my hands above my head, and I could look up and I could see it was getting brighter and brighter. And I guess eventually my arms broke the surface and I could tell that I survived a helicopter crash.
He said that he attributed some of it to luck as well as his physical abilities.
A crash into water is traumatic. Most passengers will be stunned and unable to act quickly. Research shows that as many as 15% of passengers fail to take any action. In fact, drowning is the leading cause of death following a helicopter ditching or crash into water.
With the water temperatures we had, even with a survival suit on, as soon as you get immersed, that cold water is going to rob your ability to hold your breath.
That's why survival training is a critical rehearsal for such an event. When investigators dig into the training of all the people on board Cougar 91, they discover that everyone had received mandatory survival training in a simulated ditching.
If the helicopter sinks, you have to wait till it's fully submerged. And then you kind of take your last breath, and you release your seatbelt, your hand's already on the ledge, and you pull yourself out.
But Decker was the only passenger who had cold water experience. In his youth, he sailed often at the Atlantic and had capsized in the cold sea.
When the helicopter suddenly filled with icy water, I could react instinctively. It was like a reflex to take a breath and to hold it and to stay calm until I could get to the surface.
While Decker's training and cold water experience played a key role in his survival, safety on board a helicopter begins long before it lifts off.
The only way to keep every offshore worker safe is to keep every helicopter in the air.
In its final report, the Transportation Safety Board makes recommendations that will improve safety not just in the Sikorsky, but in all helicopters. Emergency underwater breathing apparatus are now mandatory for all occupants of helicopters involved in overwater flights. The unit provides approximately 2 minutes of air.
This was another key change that took place as a result of this accident. And again, not just in Canada, but around the world.
The TSB also recommends reviewing how long a helicopter should be able to run without any oil in the main gearbox.
It was a broad and deep investigation that uncovered every safety issue that there was to uncover about that helicopter and about flying in the offshore. I think our recommendations made flying in the offshore much, much safer.